Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today is a milestone episode for us, episode 150.
Wow.
Yes, sir. I thought we were actually going to hit this at the 3-year anniversary of the podcast back in December, but we got so busy with the Founders Forum, Nate, that you and I just literally didn't record podcast episodes for a while, and we just took a break, which was kind of weird for us. We're usually pretty consistent, but here we are, episode 150 at the end of January 2025, and I'm excited about this episode because I do think this reflects a little bit of a change in direction that we're going with the podcast. With the launch of the Founders Forum at the end of 2024 and working with all of these schools, I began to see an opportunity that we could take with the podcast that really hadn't occurred to me before, which is the granularity of the questions being asked by all these school owners who are working with us. Help me to kind of see like, oh, wow, we wouldn't be belaboring the point to actually get into the real nitty gritty on even seemingly small and stupid things. Like why would someone want to hear about that? But just the kind of questions that we're getting. And look, I'm not talking novice school owners. We're talking school owners that are running schools that are doing like 50,000 a month or more, 75,000 a month and more, 100,000 a month. Like, and just the questions that we're getting and the specificity, the detail, it's actually probably why they're doing so well, is that they are paying attention to details at that level. But as I was thinking about episodes that we would do here at the beginning of 2025, I just thought, let's get into some nitty gritty. Let's like look at things that we're doing. So the last episode, we really got into the nitty gritty with one very specific marketing type. And I recommend people go listen to that. In this episode, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of a very specific marketing project or a very specific project that you had at Brooklyn Music Factory last year. And I just think we can explore those things, but then I think larger principles will be drawn from that. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this, Nate. And before I kick it over to you, I do just want to say, we will be accepting more people into the Founders Forum at least one time in 2025. And if you want to get on the interest list for that, you should go to growyourmusicstudio.com/forum and just put your name in there, and you will be notified when we are able to work with you and help you massively increase your revenue, student count, and retention. So go over and see that. That's growyourmusicstudio.com/forum. I'll put it in the show notes if you're lazy and just want to click a link as opposed to typing that in. So Nate, coming out of annual planning for last year for you, you saw this opportunity in one specific aspect of your marketing bucket. And you had, I think you mentioned you had a suggestion from your SEO consultant. So can you just set the table for us so we truly understand like what was at stake here, the advice you were given, and then how you and your team acted on that advice?
Right. So we had hired an SEO consultant back in beginning of 2023, I think. And they told us point blank that one of the essential components, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, is Google My Business. And in order to rank better locally in search results, we needed to get more consistent. We needed more consistently to get reviews. And at the time, we were at about 33 reviews, all great reviews, like 5-star reviews from parents that loved it. Loved their songwriting experience at Brooklyn Music Factory with their kids, etc. But we only had 33 reviews. And I had no idea whether that was a lot or a little. But the SEO consultant said, Nate, if you want to rank better for the specific keywords that you are trying to rank for, we need to get reviews and we need to get them every month. I brought it to the team and I said, hey, here's something that's come to my attention. Maybe this will help us achieve our goals. So we were coming out of the pandemic, opening up a brand new space. And so we had massive capacity opportunities. So we were serving, say, 300 to 400 students, and we were ready to grow. So we were in a heavy growth phase in our new space. That was it. We were trying to grow to meet the capacity of our new home.
So this was a critical issue, talking about annual planning. It was a possible project as well that you brought to the team, and the team voted on this and said, yes, this would be worth our time.
Yes. And another issue came up in annual planning, which was coming out of the pandemic, Daniel. We had done a couple things that had been really, what we felt had really dinged our reputation as a brand. The first thing was we closed down our summer camp because it was an in-person camp. And so in the pandemic, we had no camp for an entire year. And so that had been serving like upwards of 400 songwriters in our community, and all of a sudden there was a vacuum there. So we didn't get an opportunity to promote brand that way. In addition, we had shrunk. Of course, we'd been all online. Our enrollment had shrunk, and specifically our ages 4 to 8-year-old group classes, our Mini Keys and Jam Band 101, had closed down for an entire year. So coming out of annual planning, one of the issues that we decided, or one of our annual projects, were to just revitalize our brand and our reputation in the community. So that became, it sounds sort of amorphous and abstract, but this became a sub project. We were like, wait a minute. Our SEO expert is saying, hey, Nate, getting reviews is really beneficial for SEO. And we were like, hey, maybe if we start asking for more reviews and getting more fast feedback from people, that'll actually help us with just renewing our brand and revitalizing it. So it sort of was serving multiple purposes.
Okay, so what were the steps that you went through to bring this into fruition?
Well, step one was I just had no idea how many reviews we were supposed to have, or even what one did,
Right.
because I just never paid attention to it. I was like,
Okay.
sure, like people should write us good reviews, but we never proactively went after them, really.
Interesting. Well, see, you've already said something that I think one more question to set this up.
Hmm.
Did you primarily spearhead this project, or did you give this over to a team member?
We gave it over to a team member.
Okay.
Because I knew that I wasn't going to consistently show up month in, month out, asking for Google reviews, et cetera. But step one was I was wearing my marketing director hat at the time, and I said,
Okay.
let's just do some research. Let's find out what other schools in New York City that are comparable to Brooklyn Music Factory, what is their Google review? What does it look
Situation.
like?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 How
Yeah.
many reviews? What's their average rating? That sort of thing. So that was step one. Like any good school owner is going to do, is they're going to survey the market,
Okay.
right?
Then what happened?
So then I just made a list. I was like, okay, great. There's a school about 3 miles from us. They have more reviews than any other school in New York City. They have about 77 reviews. We were at 33. So the
Okay.
step two was just set a target.
And you really literally looked across all New York City, not just Brooklyn,
I
or
looked,
mostly Brooklyn.
mostly Brooklyn, but
Okay.
only places where we were going to actually draw from.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
but we went in. I looked beyond to just Brooklyn, but mostly I looked at about 5 schools that I knew I'd been following for the last 10 years,
Okay.
you know.
What was your next step?
So, step after that, once we made a target, we were like, okay, well, now we have quite a gap to close. We're at 33. The leading school's at 77. It took us 7 years to get 33 reviews or whatever. so we were like, I was like, we got a little bit of work to do. So step two for me was just like realizing I wasn't going to be the solution as the owner. I wasn't going to solve this, right? So I
Okay.
needed someone who really wanted to solve it, who wanted to own it. So we ended up delegating to Will, who at the time was essentially like our lead on-site kind of manager. He wasn't in the role that Jessica is in as director of families and communication, but he was really the point person who was connecting with every parent that came through. So at the
Mm-hmm.
desk, he was our lead community room teacher. And so he was the person who, honestly, he knew more names and more families than anybody at Brooklyn Music Factory at the time. So I was like, you're perfect for this position because you actually are
Interesting.
already developing relationships with all these families in the most powerful way, which is, face to face.
Had he ever done a project like this before, or what made you know that he could handle this?
My primary, great question. So would he be great at managing all the details of this project? I don't know. Probably I didn't know that yet. But
Mm.
what I knew was he was great at connecting with parents and developing relationships with parents.
Mm.
So I said, that's what a Google review actually is all about. This campaign is all about connecting with our families and saying, hey, can you help us with something? we need to spread the word about our community, and we would love to. We're making an ask of you,
Yeah.
right?
I, so I'm gonna lead here a little bit, and
Okay,
I want
what do
and
you
I
got?
want to and I'd love to hear your response to this, because I think if you bring a team member in to an organization, no matter what their role is, if you train them well and you train them in how to follow systems and you train them in specifically how your business writes systems, holds people accountable to systems, holds people accountable to projects and tasks, and they generally can follow that framework, my experience has been, and I'll, yeah, my experience has been that you have prepped them well to expand their role and to take on more responsibility and more weight than you probably would imagine they could take. Perfect example for me right now is I literally hired a 19-year-old a couple months ago, and
Mm,
already we're giving him a lot more responsibility just
mm,
because he's been trained so well in how we do systems. Now, his personality and his drive fits the culture around here. Um, I don't think just anybody could do this, but like he's handling so much because he's been so indoctrinated in some of the easier tasks of how we handle certain
mm,
projects or that sort of thing that we've given him a lot more responsibility very quickly because he rose the challenge, but because 80% of the work was just understanding how we work. And I'm just wondering, and this is why I said I want to
mm.
maybe lead you a little bit, like I know Brooklyn Music Factory runs on systems. Do you kind of get the sense that that Will benefited from that? You know, do you see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I love that, because I think oftentimes when we think we're going to give someone more responsibility, we're giving them more. It's all of a sudden there's more complexity, and actually
Yeah.
that's the opposite of what we want. You know,
Mm,
like what I hear and what you're saying is like, if they become familiar with the simplicity of how your organization is going to operate,
right.
and what I mean, sort of when I think of that, Daniel, I think of, they know what the outcome is. Okay, we're
Right.
at 33 reviews. We want to get to 77. They know they're not alone in trying to design every way to get there, right? So they have thought partners.
Mm,
Like, I'm not saying it's all you, I'll see you in a year, tell me how you did. I'm just saying there's a clear target, it's a priority, right? That's number 3. So you will hear from me every month about this, because we have decided as a whole team that this matters, right? So that's key, because when we give, like you said, you give new responsibilities to this 19-year-old, you're not saying, I'm just trying to find, I'm trying to make work for you, right?
right.
There's a very big difference there. You're saying, we only want to do what matters. And we already decided coming out of annual planning that this sub project was going to matter.
I'm totally agree with everything you're saying there. I think I would further just briefly explain my previous comments in this way. It is a
Mm,
little bit like layering learning and teaching someone how to play music.
yes.
That you layer learning. And I think the same thing goes in teaching an employee how to work. In that
Yes.
80% of what they're going to be doing has already been learned in easier tasks, and now they're willing to rise to the occasion. And the other thing I would say is that to kind of borrow a concept from David Allen, even a very complex project can be boiled down to very small micro steps. And if you as a leader are good at envisioning what those micro steps are and can communicate those, or you have a team member that is so good at envisioning projects that they can build those micro steps for another team member, like they're like a project manager type, and
Mm,
they can lay that out very simply and easily, like do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, then all of that together will allow your team members to take on increasingly complex tasks. And I'll wrap it up by saying this, like I have that in my business with Bethany, in that I will communicate a project to her, and then I'll get this massive um, project slash task outline that she's assigned all the different team members to, due dates on them, and she's literally broken it down into all these micro steps. And sometimes there's like 40 micro steps, and she's just able to do that. Someone in the organization has to be able to do that, whether it's you or you hire that on.
This episode is sponsored by BigMusicGames.com. As our listeners know, Brooklyn Music Factory is all about a fun, fluency-first approach to music lessons. And at the foundation of our teaching methods are rhythm, melody, harmony, and songwriting games that challenge students as young as 4 years old to train their ears and flex that musical mind. Because when you set an intention of gamifying every single lesson, you're going to find improved attendance, increased play at home, and higher student retention. So we've set up a website just for our listeners so you can start playing today. Go to bigmusicgames.com/7FMS and create your free account. Again, that's bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. And if you join today, I'm going to send you a personal invite to join our weekly teacher training call with me and Greggy Bizzle, our chief game designer. Go ahead and put play back into practice with Big Music Games. We then needed to create a campaign, right? So this is a classic marketing campaign. You're like, we would like this outcome. We're going to test multiple angles on it to try to achieve it. In this case, we were asking parents to take 2 minutes out of their life to write a Google review, right? To click a link, do something. So with any great marketing campaign, you're going to have a digital aspect, you're going to have a print aspect, and you're going to have an in-person aspect, right? Basically, that's the 3 buckets I always think about. And so to go back to Will and the layered learning, what had Will already done? Well, Will had already been trained in what it meant to be in our community room and connect with parents, right? So there's a lot of training that goes into just what does it mean to, even basic stuff like reading our software, scheduling software, being able to find the name of a mom that's associated with the kid and say hello to them as they're walking through the door. That's a micro training, right? That you're talking about. So he'd gone through that. So in addition, he'd gone through a lot of the print training because we use Canva, and when he's sitting at the desk and he's not busy, he's designing posters and postcards, and he's designing new, Jumbotron cards that are going up and projected on the wall in our community room. And so he already had gone through that micro training. In addition, he had gone through some digital training, like coming in his role in camp. He'd done a lot of communication with families via email templates, right? Oftentimes it was just shooting out of our Google, shooting Gmails out of his account to all the families that had shown up that day, asking if they wanted to have in-camp lessons the next day, that kind of thing. So that's the digital component, the email component. Of course, there's automation pieces too, but we don't need to get in the weeds on that. But so he'd already had some of these layered trainings. So now it was just like, okay, what do we need families to do? We need families to actually get to the point of writing a review, which means they need to click a link, they need to get there, or they need to scan something that sends them there. So that was the next step. It was just like, hey, let's brainstorm all the different ways we can inspire a parent to take 2 minutes, right? And again, it's just email, it's just printed cards, it's in-person connection, which is basically, like we've talked about in previous episodes, there's some version of a micro script. How do you ask a parent so it doesn't feel weird? So we brainstormed those. And so Will was ready and willing to own that. Basically, they said, okay, great. Those things sound awesome. Nate, tell me a little bit more about how you ask families for this. We went back and forth. But so that was the next step, is just create the campaign and say, are we committed to doing these things every month? Right? Or all year long until we meet our target.
Okay. So those were steps 3 and 4. You recruited Will, you created these campaigns, you brainstormed, you picked a team member who was already trained on some of the skills necessary to make this work. So let's move to step 5.
Yeah, so step 5 was realizing that to be effective with this, we needed to sort of be seasonal, event-oriented, find specific moments in the year where we were celebrating and we could actually lean on our families for this ask, right? So obvious, you know what I mean? Like if you're asking all the time, it's no longer important.
Right. Yeah.
right?
And you're using the natural excitement and energy. I did the same thing. Like if a student had a really good performance and or the parent said, "Oh, I noticed this," I would always use that to like make the ask.
Yeah, totally. And the one of these fundamental pieces that I've learned at the factory is that after 15 years, you basically what you've created is this really valuable list of families in the community that
Yep.
know and trust you, right?
Yep.
So you want to be careful when you're asking them and what you're asking them for, right? Because if you're asking them, for example, to write you a review constantly all the time, well, they'll then all of a sudden the review is not that important anymore, right?
Right.
So for example, we targeted our songwriting parties. So your recital season is a great time. We targeted when our band showcases were. So we have advanced bands and adult bands and that kind of thing. They would have a showcase. We just use that as an opportunity, in-person opportunity. One of the most effective times was at the end of each week of our summer camp when there's a performance and the parents actually come for pickup, um, or even drop off on the last day of camp. That's a time when we would actually hand them a card with a QR code and just be like, hey, if you had a great week at camp, why don't you spread the word so your friends know about it? Right?
Mm.
Here you go. And then the final piece that's fascinating to me, because I just did a slight tweak, was in our system here, but our net promoter score, our NPS surveying, which we try to do twice a year, basically, you're asking families, would you refer us to a friend,
Mm.
on a scale of 1 to 10? If they check a 9 or 10, that means they're called a promoter. And all we did after that was we linked that. We said, okay, great. Tell us why. What are we doing really well? And then we just said, when they click submit, it sent them straight to our Google review link. Now, there's nothing fancy there. That's easy to do. But the reality is, before that, we never sent them straight there. Like
Mm.
that wasn't the thank you page. What we used to do is say, would you write us a review
Right.
when you have a chance? And it was that they had to actually click a link,
Mm.
right? So now we just sent them there. What's fascinating, Daniel, is I just tested out this new system. We got 11 reviews in 7 days.
Mm.
This is long after this project ended. So what we have found, though, is that the NPS survey is a great time to ask your
Mm.
promoters for reviews. So
Yeah.
those are
I'll
some
even
of the
throw
highlighted
in.
events. Mm-hmm.
I'll even throw in it. If you go in, any school owner can do this. If you go into your Google Business profile, you can get a direct link to
Yes.
send straight to a review form. Take that link and start putting it everywhere. Another little hack I will say: do not Nate reference this, but I just want to go a step further with it. You're not The goal here is not to go out hat in hand constantly pestering people with email blasts or social media posts asking for reviews. You want to do this targetedly because you don't want to be hitting people that maybe just left you a review 2 weeks ago. You want to cut down the noise in their life. They already have way too much of it, let alone coming, annoyance from you. And so one of the things that I did as a smaller studio owner, or if you were in a much larger school and you were handing it off to your version of Will, the team member that Nate was referring to, is you can even make lists of people that you've asked and when you asked them. So I literally would
Yes.
write down when I asked a certain family, I'd put the date and whether yes or no. It was like a spreadsheet, and I still have it. I'm in my old archive folder, like 5 years of asks that I had, and I was the most reviewed school in my city. So Nate, how did this turn out for you?
Well,
Or is there another step to this?
the, the only final step is this, is that nothing actually will get done unless it remains top of mind and you have a consistent rhythm around measuring the effectiveness of your campaign. So in other words, it's not enough at the beginning of the year to be like, this is important. Here are great ways that we can do it. Let's go make the material and hope it works. Right. So the key, in my role is, CEO at BMF, is to remind everyone what we said mattered and that there are ongoing projects. So basically, Will would show up to the leadership meeting and I'd just say, Will, what's the measurement? And they would have measured how far we'd gotten since the last time. And we probably measured monthly. We might have even measured quarterly, but I reminded them monthly. And so we started it. that's that final step, by the way. Before I give you the results and a couple
Mm.
of takeaways, that final step can't be, you can't actually highlight that step enough,
Oh, I
right?
see. Yeah.
So project management is not just about setting the project up for success, understanding the steps, but going through and consistently coming back to it until you either achieve the project or you fall short. But you have got to measure all the time.
This episode is sponsored by grouplessons.com. If you're looking for a group piano method that is easy to implement in your studio or school, look no farther than Piano Express from grouplessons.com. Because unlike most group piano methods, Piano Express allows students to make individual progress within the context of a larger group. And because of the at-home practice tools and gamified curriculum, students using the Piano Express method make faster progress than the average method book student. And that helps students feel excited, accomplished, and motivated to learn new music. Also, the system is really adaptable. We've got teachers using the system in their home studios, and we have many large commercial studios running our 3-room model that allows you to see up to 24 students per hour with just 2 teachers. So if you'd like to learn more about Piano Express, navigate to grouplessons.com and sign up for a free demo. You'll get to look at the method, our app and teacher guides, and we'll even give you a sneak peek of our implementation plan that has helped hundreds of studios start their group program in just a few weeks. I got a little devil in the details question for you. Was
Yep.
Will manage? Did Will have actions for himself in like a project management system? Did you create those actions
Yeah.
for him?
We
Like
just,
was
great question. We manage our projects in Asana. There
right,
was a little card in there called the Google review. I don't even know what we called the project. We probably
right.
had some fun name for it. Um, and it was underneath the heading of revitalizing our brand and meeting our enrollment targets. And he would just go in and update it. He'd just be
Mm,
like, on this date, we're at this many reviews.
okay,
And they would share, I'm sorry, they would share that, and
okay.
we would say, okay, great. Um,
I, I think the way that the way that we would probably manage it over here is that we would have probably recurring tasks set up for a
yes.
team member where it's like, like ask 5 people this week, or they build like a mini project around asking people after one of these band showcases, or handing out those cards, or that sort of thing, or maybe like a mini one-time project where it's like, hey, make sure the jumbotron, make the QR code and get it up on the jumbotron.
Yes.
So that's kind of how we would handle it around here, just again to get devil in the details.
Yeah, and we absolutely would do that kind of thing. The
Okay.
only iteration I would say is that I would expect Will to create the tasks based on the meeting, brainstorm,
Yeah.
etc. Not
Yes.
Nate create the tasks and send them to the Will.
100%. And this goes back to what we said earlier, which is good training, because I don't do that around here. Either if it's complex enough, Bethany does it, or if the team member, if it, like if it's across multiple team members, then Bethany's probably creating that project. If it's just one person's project, I will give them a project brief and they're expected to set up the project and all the subtasks.
I love it. Love it.
So what were the
Um,
results, Nate?
so we started, like I said, I think at 33 reviews, and that was on 3/1/23, I guess. And now we just measured and we're at 101 reviews, which is far surpasses what our goal was 77. And the next closest school has 70. I guess it was, yeah, 77. They haven't actually moved in the
Wow.
time. Yeah, which is fascinating. And so they
Wow.
probably had 70 reviews back when we started. They're now at 76. There's a School of Rock with 50 that's around the corner. But we're far ahead of everybody in that. And,
Wow.
um, you know, those are the results. The first one is just that these are the kind of micro projects. It's not a big fancy project, right? So it's easy to kind of set it and forget it and be like, this will work if I just put a poster with the QR code up. Doesn't work like that. Like, it takes effort. You put it perfectly when you said parents are already, there's so much noise in their life that you're basically trying to get their attention, and you're trying to get their attention at the right time for the right thing. We had this SEO consultant who said, this is important. And so to a degree, we have to work and we have to trust that. We trust our consultants and our experts to tell us what to do, and we follow the lead. but I couldn't. The only way I could measure whether we were doing this job was whether or not we had more reviews. I didn't know the long tail outcome that they were. I wasn't measuring, for example, the local listing and where we were, but I did go back to measure it recently using a tool called Bright Local. We were talking about this before the app. And I put in things like music lessons for kids, and on Google Maps, like in the local listing, we were number 3 out of all the schools. So that's pretty good for us. But that's sort of my number 2 conclusion is like, if I need to be hyper specific about whether or not we're succeeding, I don't necessarily always have that lag measure, right? I'm just measuring, are we getting more reviews? Automation absolutely does work. So you've got a CRM tool, you're building an email automation. If they click this button or they open that, you redirect them to a new email that says, hey, have you ever shared your story on a Google review? That kind of thing. You do want to build that into the campaign. So you don't want everything to be about whether or not your team member will remember every step every month, right? So use automation. It does work. The final piece is that, like I just shared in the results, probably a lot of the schools in your area, music schools, aren't actually focusing on this. So it's fascinating to me that we now have far more reviews than any other music school in the area. And that means that it's an opportunity for you. If you're listening and you're thinking, wait, maybe this is a way for me to really improve my SEO and my local listings, because maybe other schools aren't. So that's the last takeaway, is that you'd think that everyone would do this. Turns out they're not, because they ain't doing it in Brooklyn.
And I would say a bigger picture takeaway is, on the surface, this episode was about reviews and that sort of thing. But really what we're talking about here is how to hand off projects like this, delegate them effectively, and even getting into the details of how Nate or myself have done that successfully. And so I hope that's really helpful for folks in hearing how to delegate this stuff out so that you're not doing it and not even necessarily setting up, the details of the project.
Yeah, do less, direct the work, delegate everything possible, and develop others. That's that opening quote I read. That's what we ended up digging into. And so, we set the vision as founders, but we need a team to achieve it.